just before 7.
Okay, right.
See you, Lucy. Thanks, love. Take care.
See you.
Go for it. See it as a conversation.
Yeah.
Be on the notes.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us for the almost ultimate guide to caring for your indoor plants. And we're really honoured to have Darren from the Botanical Boys with us for the first of many live broadcasts from Cesano TV. Over to Darren.
Jane, thank you very much indeed. I'll take a few.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody who's joining us. I'm Darren, as Jane says, from the Botanical Boys. I'm one of the founders. We're based down here in King's Cross. If you've not been down to King's Cross yet, it's a new swanky area, Coal Drops Yard. It's only been open for about 2 years. Got some lovely shops, lovely designer shops down here. And we're in the middle of all those designer shops selling beautiful plants, pots and accessories, handmade artifacts, as you can see, sort of things behind me, all the way from Africa, handmade, believe it or not, by women and people on the beaches. And they do this for a living to support their families. We started the business many years, about 3-4 years ago now, selling plants. And this is one of our top things we're going to be sharing with you, and sharing our passion is the most important thing. And our passion is connecting people to nature. Very, very important. We've all just come out of all these lockdowns. Some of us are still in sort of lockdown mode. We're not quite out of the woods just yet. And one thing that has helped us to keep Botanical Boys going throughout the 3 lockdowns is really sharing some useful, helpful plant care tips, as well as our terrarium masterclasses, which we do as well. Yes, they're really good fun, bringing people together online and now face-to-face again over the next few months, where we come together as friends and family, and you help build a garden in a jar, essentially. However, we're not going to talk about terrariums. That's something else we do as well. We're very famous for that. But we're going to share with you today some common tips and some common pitfalls that some of you may have experienced at home with your plants. Now, who of you outside there has actually killed or think they've overwatered their plants? Yes, we're going to talk about watering, overwatering your plants, underwatering your plants. It's so complicated, and we end up just giving up, don't we? Or we call ourselves plant killers. For those of you out there, raise a hand. I can't see your hands, but raise your hand. There's probably a lot of it. There's 80% of you, I'm sure, watching. You say, I'm a plant killer. Well, then hopefully we're going to try and get that off you, take that burden away from your shoulders. Because actually looking after plants, you're not just looking after plants, guys, you're also looking after your own well-being as well. By keeping plants alive, it also makes us feel good as well. And having plants around us can be challenging. So it's not always bad if a plant dies, because there's a number of factors why plants can die or survive. So there's 3 of those things I'm going to go through today, guys. I'm going to go through soil, lighting, and basically watering as well. So what's the differences and what to look out for, and why we need to look out for certain things or do certain things to ensure the best longevity of our lovely green friends at home. So let's think about lighting. Now, I've got a big light on top of my head at the moment, so I'm feeling rather alive right now. You can see me, I can see myself on screen. I'm feeling rather joyful. The sun's coming out, hopefully soon. This summer's been so delayed, hasn't it? But most of our houseplants, believe it or not, guys, they come from tropical places around the world. And if some of you didn't know this, a lot of our tropical plants, which we take for granted, come from many tropical parts of the world. In the 1800s, around about the 1830s, we didn't have, and before the 1830s, we didn't have plants like the ones we take for granted today, because there was no way to transport them successfully. For example, there was one chap named Nathaniel Ward who actually invented a Wardian case. And that was used to transport plants on those big, long ship journeys around the world, especially from Australia and South America. So we really appreciate that a lot of these beautiful plants come from lots of different tropical regions in the world. Well, what does that mean in terms of lighting or our plant care? Well, we've got to really have a basic understanding of what these guys have, where these guys have come from. And we try and emulate similar conditions to ensure the longevity of our beautiful plants, to make us feel good and make our homes look good and styled for as long as possible. So lighting, guys. A lot of tropical plants, such as this lovely Califia, in in one of our pots here, we sell down in the shop in King's Cross. Copenhagen pot. This is called beautiful styled, original looking pot from Italy. These are perfect for these sorts of house plants, and they fit in almost every styled home. But essentially, the plant itself needs to be placed. There's no point getting a nice fancy pot and then placing your plant somewhere where the lighting's bad. So these sort of plants, like califias, or even ferns, like these little babies here. We get big ferns as well. Most of us have got ferns at home. Some of us struggle with ferns at home, and they sometimes curl up, go brown on the edges. We overwater them, or we overexpose them to sunlight. Now, a lot of our customers, a lot of our clients, because we do quite a lot of installations for companies as well as individuals, they always ask me they always have the same problem: too much sunlight when the sun is out. At the moment, there's too many clouds around when there shouldn't be. But if you get a lot of sunlight, southwest facing, for example, well, then a lot of tropical plants like Califia, they need a fairly humid environment. And we'll talk about watering in a second. But they don't like too much light because the plants originate from places like South America or the Far East, where they actually adapt to slightly lower light conditions. Why? Because they're in the jungles of South America, for example. They get dappled light. So as the leaves and the trees sway with the wind, they're just getting dappled sunlight. So how do you emulate that, as I said earlier? How do you try and copy that environment at home? Well, just where I'm standing at the moment in my studio, there's just enough ambient light coming through the window over here, facing westward, but there's no direct sun coming through that particular window. If you've just got about enough light that you can see things around, that's usually just enough light required for a lot of these tropical plants who otherwise get very sensitive if they're in the direct window, in direct blazing sun, and it scorches their leaves. And a lot of these plants tend to go brown on the tips, or they curl up to try and protect themselves. It's a bit like you and I when we go on holiday. Yeah, when that's going to happen again. Hopefully soon for everyone. We put some sun cream on, and that protects our skin. Same sort of thing you have to consider with your plants. Don't use sun cream, of course, but just give them a little bit more shade than too much direct sun. Now, you're probably asking, well, what plants do like direct sun, Darren? Well, I'll show you guys, and it's very easy. It's our lovely little cowboy cactus here in one of our ringer baskets, handmade in Africa, actually. And these things are very, very sharp, of course, if you've got cactus at home. They love sunlight. So the more cactus and succulent type plants, they prefer a lot more sunlight than perhaps our more delicate little Califia friend from the jungles of South America. So we're going to talk a little bit more about these shortly. Another plant you might have at home, which may like low light conditions, is these Sansevierias. Sansevierias, or mother-in-law's tongue, in one of our natural fibre pots here, our melange pots, which we also sell, 100% cotton pots, beautifully styled. I mean, look how elegant that is. Imagine that sitting on a nice little side white unit in your living room or your hallway. Your pots are just as important as your plants, because you want your plants to look as good in your home when you're showing them off and giving them a good life. So just have a think about that, guys, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this is a Sansevieria, usually tough as old boots, Very, very difficult to kill unless you do something tragically wrong and leave it neglected for months on end. But essentially, these babies can tolerate a south-facing window and also a north-facing window, which is, as I said, the Califia would prefer north-facing ideally, or at least well away from a sunny window, a little bit more dappled shade. These also can tolerate high sun and low light conditions also. So just something to think about. They're really easy to look after. And actually, guys, just a little fact, this plant itself, the Sansevieria, is actually on NASA's top 20 list of air purifying plants. Yes, it's been tested. It takes out things like formaldehyde and things like that you find in paints, in furniture, manufacturing, all around the house. You might not sense it, of course, but the plants help reduce toxins in the air in your home and your office. So that's another good reason to have a lot of plants around the home. But just remember, this one is a little bit tougher in light and low light conditions as well. So don't get too confused about that. This is probably the easier one you want to go for those conditions, especially for those of you who are not plant experts, you're just starting out and you just want to perhaps do your student digs or your first home you've just moved into. Then a Sansevieria, again, a little bit heavy one here, just a different particular species. So, soil, guys, we need lovely soil. So a lot of these plants, in particular, with this lovely Califia, what sort of soil and watering conditions it needs? Well, it needs a good potting soil. Potting soil is basically any sort of potting soil you can buy from your local garden centre. We use John Innes number 2. I'm not advertising for John Innes, guys. It's just one of my favourite bits of soil. Really, really sterile, lovely and slightly fluffy and moist. Now, that can go in most of your plants for your home. For example, if I take this Califia, remember it likes moist conditions because it's from the jungles of South America, for example. So you want nice moisture retaining soil with a little bit of feed in there. Obviously, this time of the year, springtime, early summer, you want to start feeding your plants. That's a different subject, but basically get yourself a good old all-purpose houseplant feeder and just pop that into your soil and follow the instructions on the label. When you get your pot, guys, just put your plant pot inside and put it in the right position, as I said earlier. Now, if you've got a cactus or a Sansevieria, basically thick plants which withhold their moisture, they don't need watering as often because due to their natural habitat, they withhold lots of moisture in their leaves, such as our little cowboy here. See how thick that is? Now, a lot of people will end up watering their cactus and they realize they've killed it 2 weeks later after they just bought it from the garden centre. So what I'm going to do, that doesn't need moist soil like the other plants. However, when you do come to water your cactus, it's usually every 4 to 5 weeks on average throughout the year. In the summer, if it's really blistering summer, you might want to water it just within 4 weeks, but you don't want to overwater these guys. When you do water them now, I'm just going to show you a little tip. Let's pop this soil down. Take your plant pot out of your decorative pot. Remember, most of us have a lovely decorative pot, and to avoid overwatering, take your plant pot out in its plastic container from the garden centre. When it's due watering, when this one is, grab your watering can here, like our little horse watering can here, really beautiful, elegant watering can. Give it a good old water, about a cupful or so for this size pot. It's about 15 centimetre pot. Can you see the water dripping? Dripping. You see how quick that happens? It's because, and I'm going to show you quickly if we've got time. We do have time, don't we? We'll carry on, guys. I'm going to show you how to make a little bit of a cactus mix. Now, what's the difference between that soil and the soil I've just shown you? Well, remember the soil I've just shown you is moisture retaining. So if I squeeze that in my hand, it's quite clumpy. Now I'm going to reproduce the soil conditions for your cactus so you don't so you can understand the elements and the different types of soil these plants need, as opposed to your tropical plants, which need moisture retaining soil. What I'm going to do is going to make up my own mix of cactus soil, or you can just buy cactus soil from Garden Centre. Personally, I like making it. So get yourselves roughly 3 scoopfuls. I'm just going to use the same scoop. If you use a cup, use the same cup, or if you use an empty plant pot, use the same size plant pot for all your ratio mixing. So what I've mixed here, guys, so far is 3 to 4 cupfuls or scoopfuls of normal potting mix. It's a bit like a baking class. Then I'm going to add a little bit of sand. Horticultural sand is better. I've just got some leftover white sand here from our terrariums. And I'm going to use 2 big scoops of sand. So remember, I've done 3 scoops of soil to 2 scoops of sand. Now I'm going to use this stuff, which looks like snow. Doesn't taste like snow. It's not as cold. It's really dusty. Can anyone guess what this is? It's perlite. Perlite is a natural glass substance from the ground, and it's used in all kinds of horticultural products. This helps break down the soil. So I'm going to put a couple scoopfuls in there. And essentially, I'm going to mix it up just as if you're baking. So if any bakers out there, you love this in the kitchen. It really does feel like you're doing an apple crumble. Honestly, Jane, it feels like apple crumble. And it's a bit dusty. Should be wearing a mask for this bit, actually. So essentially, all I've done there, now if I hold the soil in my hand, it's dusty. Wear a mask, basically, guys. It's much more crumbly, you see. That is the perfect mix for your cactus, excuse me, and succulents, because they do not want to retain moisture in the roots, which brings us on nicely to watering. So why am I talking about moisture, water source? Sounds all very confusing. So essentially, when we water our plants, has anyone done this before? Inside the decorative pot, we do that once a week, don't we, on average, to our tropical plants, our green plants which need water. And we forget about it, and another week comes by, and we water it again, not considering how much water we've given it. And then suddenly the plant all goes floppy and dry and black, and it sort of dies off. Why? Because we've overwatered it. And one of the top tips is, if you're just getting used to watering your plant, take your plant pot out over a bowl, or in your sink, in your shower, or outside, even if you've got a patio or garden. Water your plant over a bowl, let the water drain first, give it a little shake, and then place it into a pot like so. Now, the other thing is about these particular pots, it has a hole at the bottom. So if you've got an outdoor pot or an indoor pot like this Copenhagen pot, basically pop it into a tray. I'm just going to grab some water. So, just top up my watering can. And essentially, when you water your pot, because it's got a hole in it, you'll usually get the water dripping into the tray. And if you've got loads of water sitting in your tray, it's usually a sure sign that you're going to get root rot eventually, because you're over watering your plant, and that's something that we all get wrong. Now, I was just speaking to a colleague earlier. They were watering their Sansevieras weekly, which you should never do. And because it's inside a plastic pot, inside a decorative pot, they're watering it. And unfortunately, the water was building up inside the decorative pot. You have to excuse me 1 second, guys. Oh, excuse me, that's the dust from our lovely perlite. Recommend a bottle of water when you're doing that. And a mask. And a mask. And essentially, when you're watering your plant, guys, the top killer is overwatering your plants. And the water, which we don't realise, starts to pool at the bottom of your pot, which you cannot see. And it causes a bit of a reservoir. So slowly but surely, and sometimes quickly, your plant dies of root rot. So it's always a good thing to just test your pots. If you haven't got a hole in the bottom of your pot like this one, And you're going to overwater and kill your plants very easily if you don't check your water. Now, has anyone pulled the plant pots out and there's been a pool of water inside? Yeah, we've all done it, haven't we? To get used to watering, guys, you've got to get to know your plants. And I always say to people in our classes down here in King's Cross, to get used to your plants, water them as required on the label. And until you're 100% sure on how much water you're giving them, then take the pot out, water it over the tap, as I said earlier, let it drain, then put it back into your pot, and therefore you shouldn't overwater your plants that way because you can't see what's going on otherwise. So guys, that's essentially some top tips for some of our plants. We've got some Sansevieria, just to recap, and some cactus, which do not need a lot of water at all, once a month, once every 5 weeks. And we've got our tropical plants, like these beautiful palms here, and these calefias. And also we talked about some ferns. They love moisture, but again, don't overwater them. Do watch them, usually once a week on average. And one top tip, guys, has anyone got any hanging plants from their ceiling as opposed to plants on their side units? Now, if you've got a plant pot on the lower ground, on the lower level of your room, and you may have a plant pot, say, hanging up in the air, which one do you think is going to get driest first within a week's period? It's going to be the top one, isn't it? Because the temperature rises inside, hot air rises, doesn't it? So you're more than likely, your hanging plants may require a little bit more attention more quickly than your plants perhaps lower to the ground, where the air humidity is much cooler and less chance of drying out. It's also something to consider. And I'll leave you another top tip, guys. We've squeezed in quite a lot in today's session. I hope you're learning a lot. If you're struggling for watering your plants, if you're like me, I've got like 100 plants at home, what I tend to do is try and group my plants together for those lighting requirements and watering requirements in particular. So all the plants that need lots of bright light, like your cactus and Sansevierias and other plants, I put them near the window and I know when to water them every 4 weeks or so. If I've got my more delicate Califia type jungle type plants, including my ferns, then I will keep them grouped together slightly away from the window with less direct sun. So I concentrate my watering once a week with those ones, so I don't make the mistake of watering my cactus by accident, therefore killing my cactus. That's just some top tips, guys. I hope that's been useful. If you do have any questions at all on what we're doing, we run a lot of events, bringing people together, connecting to nature. It's very important these days. So do look after your plants. They will look after you in so many other ways as well. There's so many good health benefits to having plants around your home. It also gives us something to do as well at the weekend. So guys, with that said, I'll bring Jane back on to do our little finishing touch. And thank you very much for listening, guys.
So there you have it, the almost ultimate guide to caring for indoor plants. We'll try to respond to any questions that we receive as soon as we can. And on behalf of Susano and all our viewers, thank you to Darren and Ben, Botanical Boys. And just to remind you that all their products have free shipping for 24 hours on susano.com. And all these lovely pots and vessels that we've talked about tonight are also available from the Botanical Boys section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. And also for the first 5 orders, what I thought we'd do, guys, because this is we've just come off lockdown, and we all want to go out and all want to get a bit excited about something. We've got these lovely 100% cotton with, I think they've got birds and animals and all kinds of beautiful nature inspired images. So we're going to give 5 of those away for the first few orders. So you should get one of those in your packs, whatever you order. But as always, guys, stay connected to nature. I hope you've enjoyed the session. There's lots more learning to add. But anyway, have a beautiful evening from Jane, Susano and the team, and Botanical Boys. We wish you well and stay safe.
See you all soon.
Bye now.
Bye.